is a PFA guide for right triangle trigonometry. So I wrote this stuff on the board. This is basically the notes you're going to need for this PFA. Starting with SOHCAHTOA, it's just a cheat sheet for sine, cosine, and tangent. What it says is that S stands for sine, C stands for cosine, and T stands for tangent. And then O, A, and H all stand for opposite, adjacent, or hypotenuse. The other thing you need to know is how to tell adjacent versus opposite versus hypotenuse. That's probably the most challenging thing. So when we're dealing with the triangle, the first thing we want to recognize is the right angle. The side across from the right angle is always the hypotenuse. So I highly recommend taking notes on this stuff. It will help you in the following math class as well. The hypotenuse is also the longest side. So side across from the right angle. That's what angle, that's a symbol for angle. And it's also the longest side. Okay? Then opposite, it depends on which angle we're looking at. So if we're looking at this angle right here, we'll call it X. The opposite of X is A. So opposite is across from a given angle. And I'm going to underline given because that's really important to recognize that it's not just any side, it's only when it's across from this angle. Because if it was across from this angle, then it would be B. So it's not always the same thing. Across from a given angle. And then adjacent is whatever is right next to the angle. So it's touching the angle. But it's not the hypotenuse. But not hypotenuse. Okay, so throughout this, you're gonna see a lot of abbreviations. Mainly that hypotenuse will either be H or HYP. Opposite is gonna be O or OPP. And then adjacent is gonna be A or ADJ. Keeping in mind again that if we're given the angle X, then what's across is opposite and what's next to is adjacent. But if we were given an angle Y, then across from that is opposite B, and next to it would be adjacent A. However, the hypotenuse always stays the same. So think about that when it comes to the direction your triangle is facing, because they're not always going to be given in this format. I'm going to go ahead and erase this so that I can start some practice problems. Okay, so back to over here, what SOHCAHTOA does is it tells us which sides we're looking at and which function to use based on that. So if we're given an opposite and we need to find a hypotenuse and we're given an angle, that means we're using sine. Same with cosine, tangent, and so on. On this side, we're dealing with if we're missing a side, but we're given an angle. And on this side, we're dealing with when we're missing an angle, we're only given the right angle and at least two sides. So we're gonna have practice that goes into both of those. And so this is what's called inverse trig. And another way you're going to see that is arc, sine, or arc, cosine, or arc, tangent. They all mean the same thing as these, but Summit tends to write them as arc. Okay, so our first question, and all of these are from your diagnostic, we're trying to find the tangent of R, okay? So we're given this triangle. Okay, and we're trying to find the tangent of R. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna find where is R? Well, we're dealing with this right here. So this angle, tangent says that we're looking for opposite and adjacent. So our opposite is across from R, and that's 35. And our adjacent is next to R, that is 12. And our hypotenuse is across from the right angle, 37. Something I always recommend with these is write down as much information as you know next to your triangle, because sometimes it's really easy to jumble things up when we're not writing it all out. So now we just want to write it out. Tan of R equals your opposite 35 over your adjacent 12. Okay. Okay, the second one we're going to do here is this triangle that is here. Okay, and it asks, what is sine of A? As I'm going through this video, I highly recommend taking a pause every time I ask the question to try and solve it on your own and see if you can get the right answer. So again, we're going to start by figuring out what sides they are. Well, I know that this is my hypotenuse, and we're looking at angle A, so across from that is our opposite, and that means this is our adjacent. Well, sine deals with opposite and hypotenuse, so 3 and 5, 3 over 5. Okay. Pause if you need that. Take it down. I'm going to erase it now. Okay. So now we have a sideways triangle. And this is C, A, B. This time we're given an angle, it's 41 degrees. And we're given a side length that's 9 inches. And it says, what is AB? Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is figure out what do we need. That's AB. Well, here's AB. We're going to call that X. Okay. The next thing we want to do is recognize which sides we have. So, first off, here's our right angle. So there is our hypotenuse. Okay. Here's our given angle. So across from that is our opposite. And next to it is our adjacent. Okay. Well, going over here, we're trying to find a missing side. Okay, we're given one angle and one side. And we're dealing with the opposite and the hypotenuse, which means we want to look at sine. So now all we do is set it up. We say sine of an angle, that's what this means. So sine of 41. And you always want to write this out like this, okay? Equals your opposite 9 over your hypotenuse x. Okay, 2 more rules to remember, and that's pretty much all you need for notes. And it is, if the variable is on the bottom, we're dividing, okay? So I'm gonna just say x, but sometimes you'll have something else. If x is on top, we multiply. Okay, so what I mean by that is we want to put the 9 over here. So we have 9 divided by sine of 41 equals x. And then all you have to do now is plug it into your calculator. If you're using the Desmos calculator on Summit, make sure you put it in degree mode. If you need help with that, just let me know. The answer we get with this is 13.7. So just plug that in and make sure that that's what you got as well. Okay, I'm going to erase that now. It wants us to find x. Okay, This time x is in a degree and it wants it to the nearest degree, so that means a whole number. Looking at this, we want to start by determining what sides we have. Well, we have over here is the opposite, and then over here is our hypotenuse. So once again, we're dealing with sine, but this time we're missing an angle, so we're going to deal with that one. So we have the inverse sine of our opposite 8 over our hypotenuse 14 equals an angle. And when you plug that in, you're going to get 35. So just make sure that that is what you get. All right. Okay, it asks us to solve for y. So go ahead and give this one a try and then play the video to make sure you got it correctly. Again, the first thing we want to do is find which sides we have. Well, this is our hypotenuse. This is our opposite. That means we're dealing with sine because that's the only one that has both of them. So sine of my angle 51 equals my opposite y over my hypotenuse 12. So now my x, my y, is on the top, so I'm multiplying. So what that looks like is I just say 12 times sine of 51 equals y. So now y equals, when you plug this into your calculator, you should get 9.3. Okay. Here's our next triangle. It asks us what RT is. Well, RT is right here, so we're going to call that X. We're given our angle, so I'm just going to write down everything I have. Angle is 63 degrees. Across from that is 14, so we have our opposite of 14. And then next to it is our adjacent. So we have our adjacent, which is X. And there is nothing on the hypotenuse, so we don't deal with it. So opposite and adjacent tells us that we're dealing with cosine. Sorry, tangent, which means I want to take tangent of 63 equals my opposite over my adjacent. X is on the bottom, so I divide. 14 divided by tangent of 63 equals X, and you should get 7.1. All right, bear with me a little bit longer. This walks you through, again, the whole diagnostic. If you have questions as you go, just please ask me. Okay, this is a word problem, and it says that an 18-foot tall tree casts a shadow that's 25 feet long. So I'm not going to write the whole problem, but it says 18-foot tree and a 25-foot shadow. Find angle of elevation. Cool. So the first thing you want to do is draw a picture. So here is my tree. Here is my shadow of my tree. So there's 25 feet. There's 18 feet. And then we want to think about our hypotenuse here, which is invisible, it's in the air. You can draw a whole triangle if you want. So angle of elevation is going to be this bottom angle every single time. It says from the ground to the top of the tree, and from there we're given our opposite and our adjacent, which tells us that we need to use tangent. So tan, and we're missing an angle, so we're going to use a -1, the inverse of opposite 18 over adjacent 25, and this is going to give you about 35.8 degrees. So just make sure you know how to plug that in. You have to use the second button on your calculator in order to do it. Okay. Cool, cool. This one says we have an 8-foot ramp on a truck bed that is 3 feet off the ground. And we want the angle between board and ground. Okay, so once again, we're drawing our picture. Here's my truck bed, here's a tire. Oh, don't want to do a dashed line. There's my ramp, it's 8 feet. It's 3 feet off the ground. And we're trying to find right here, this angle. Okay, so once again, we're dealing with our opposite. And then here's our right angle, so this is our hypotenuse. Opposite and hypotenuse says we need to use sine. We're finding an angle, so we want to use inverse sine of our opposite over adjacent, or hypotenuse. Okay, this is one in your diagnostic that isn't asking you to solve. Instead, it's looking for this answer. Arc sine of 3/8 equals your angle. Okay, arc sine and inverse sine are the exact same thing. So just make sure that if you see arc, it's probably because you're missing an angle. Okay, that's all it wants on that one. But if you solved it, you would just plug it in the calculator like this. All right, I just have one more. And it asks us to solve for x. So here's our angle. Here's our right angle. Across from that is our hypotenuse. Next to the angle is our adjacent. Cosine uses adjacent and hypotenuse. So we say cosine of our angle equals our adjacent x over our hypotenuse, 15. X is on the top, so we're going to multiply 15 times cosine of 60. And we get about 7.5. Okay. Remember, I'm happy to help a little bit with the PFA, but you have to write this stuff out in order for me to do that. Yeah. That's it.